The attack on Pearl Harbor was a military strike by the Japanese and which was unplanned. Pearl Harbor was part of World War II and happened on December 7, 1941. The Japanese Navy Air Service struck the United States naval base located in Honolulu, Hawaii. The Japanese had a couple reasons to attack Pearl Harbor. The Japanese wanted to destroy large ships and weaken the American people. The Japanese Navy airstrike bombed the air service and killed many people and several ships.
The attack on Pearl Harbor killed 2,403 people, and 1,000 people were wounded from the attack. The attack also destroyed around 20 American ships, and taxes were raised to help pay for the damages. This also caused the U.S. to be involved into war while they were trying to avoid the war for ages and to be in isolation. While fighting in the war, they fought for a long time to take revenge for the attack caused by the Japanese.
It only took 6 months for the American Navy to recover from the attack. Americans later survived the attacks of the Axis allies, Germany, Italy, and Japan. After Pearl Harbor, Nimitz took over the ships of the Pacific fleets.
Our project, The Attack on Pearl Harbor, is related to debate and diplomacy in history. Pearl Harbor was a big step for the United States since it caused the United States to go into World War II. Pearl Harbor destroyed 20 U.S. ships, the Pacific Fleet, and 300 U.S. jets. Pearl Harbor was influenced and forced the end of isolationism during wars. Pearl Harbor caused the economic taxes to go up to help pay for the war. Banks paid billions of dollars to support the war, and war bonds were issued.
The Pearl Harbor attack from the Japanese was a big political controversy. The Franklin D. Roosevelt administration attempted to defeat the issue for the duration of the war to avoid a violent battle of politics and to keep the country's attention fixed on the war effort. The administration succeeded. The United States and Japan attempted to negotiate for peace and tried to end sanctions. Both of the countries were unsuccessful in negotiations.
The attack on Pearl Harbor from the Japanese happened in the morning of December 7, 1941, right before 8 a.m. The tragic event led the U.S. to go in World War II. They could have prevented the attack by taking all the information and predicting when it will happen and taking more military action. The U.S. government had a lot of warnings and information about the attack, but they mistook their strategy, and the bombing sadly still happened. They overlooked the Japanese forces and missed the signs of the military strike.
Our piece of evidence shows some of the warning signs from the Japanese and shows how they could have prevented the attack and for it to destroy multiple airplanes and killed many people. U.S. officials overlooked Japanese forces' preparations for war and missed warning signs of the impending attack, including an intercepted December 6 Japanese message asking about berthing positions at Pearl Harbor and a radar sighting of a large group of airplanes headed toward Oahu on the morning of December 7th. This shows that the United States had many warnings prior to the Pearl Harbor attack on December 7, 1941. Before the attack, the Japanese sent messages to the United States and also trained their forces for around a year. All of this is a primary source shown by interviews, diaries, and government documents. They missed all the warnings prior to the attack and caused the attack to happen. They should have seen the message about the seedings of the ships from the Japanese and should have taken it to prevent it from happening.
The Japanese assumption about the feelings of the American people was completely wrong. The attack on Pearl Harbor had the opposite effect. It served to unite Americans. Before the attack on Pearl Harbor, there were large numbers of isolationists that had prevented the United States' involvement in World War II. After the attack on Pearl Harbor, the country came together to defeat the Axis powers.
The Japanese thought differently about the United States, thinking that they wouldn't do anything after the attack on the Navy base. But they defeated the Axis power instead of not doing anything. They were successful in doing it. We have a lot of evidence to prove recordings, all of the attacks. We know all about the attacks. We can prove all of the evidence with photographs, interviews, and much more to prove our theses.
This proves our thesis by showing Japanese thinking about the United States was wrong and thought that they would stay isolated. By hating the U.S. and thinking wrong about the U.S., they have warning signs about the attack to prove that we're going to attack the base. After the war, they luckily defeated the Axis powers, while the Japanese thought they wouldn't do anything because they were isolated from World War II at that time. That's it.
The United States had a lot of courage to attempt to defeat them. They didn't really do any attack to the Japanese itself, but they defeated other countries in the war. Since the United States defeated the Axis powers, they have a lot of military and air force power. They have a lot of active personnel, and with about 500,000 troops. They spend a lot of money on the military and air force, spending around 80 million United States dollars on the military alone. This is how they successfully defeated the Axis powers with all their military spending.
Dead bodies were everywhere, in the water, the streets, on the islands. Many would never be recovered, and today they remain in the waters or immersed in the soil. There is no doubt that the devastation of the event caused a lot of heartache, both physically and psychologically. And there is no doubt the events of that day had a major impact on the American government and military forces.
This quote proves that the aftermath of Pearl Harbor was devastating to the U.S. military and was a tragic event to the whole United States, and shows that the Japanese had a lot of hate to the U.S. since they destroyed and caused a lot of damage to one of the naval bases. This proves our thesis because they could have had a lot of more military on that day with all the warnings and the hatred from the Japan's military.
The evidence shown isn't all the attack of the Japanese military did to the minor district on the naval base, but it did not do a lot more, which was a big turning point for the United States, which caused the military to come together to defeat the Axis power, which showed that they have a lot of military power to defeat them, because the three countries in the Axis power has a lot of soldiers active in the U.S. military. It caused Pearl Harbor to be one of the biggest incidents in the U.S. and has caused the U.S. to lose many resources and civilization.
The attack was terrifying and had people worried if their family member or loved one had died being on the boat. A lot of people donated after the attack. Citizens of Hawaii donated things to the military, such as masks, money, materials, and much more. This shows how much the attack affected the United States and proves how much they care about the military and how they can help in any way that they can. It is a turning point of the U.S., and there were many warnings from the attack.
The attack on Pearl Harbor that happened on December 7th, 1941, led the United States to go into World War II. They could have prevented the attack from comprehending all the signs and warnings from the Japanese. They could have had more military and or knew the plans from the Japanese. For example, the Japanese sent them a message asking them about the berthing positions at the Pearl Harbor naval base. Next, the Japanese thought differently about the United States and thought they wouldn't do anything after attack and would stay isolated. For instance, the attack caused a lot of damage and many people were dead after the attack. The attack most likely caused a major destruction and major damage to the American government and military.